Welcome, everybody, and welcome to our special guest, Vernon Pahl, a lawyer who truly enjoys practicing law and many other things in life. Welcome, Vern.
Thank you for having me.
Vern is a lawyer who went from being a great sailor to a great lawyer. But I don't want to put any pressure on you about the last part, Vern. You know, one purpose of this show was to have guests that went to law school, like Ian Hannamansing, and then ventured to do something else successfully, oftentimes applying their knowledge of the law to their new venture, much like Eli Gershkovich from Steamworks, the CEO that we had on a number of weeks ago. Today, Vern, we have the opposite. Vern has done any number of interesting things before going to law school and then becoming a lawyer. And so in that way, you're a unique guest. Vernon has been described as the lawyer we should all strive to be. And after having met Vern, I concur with that statement. Before law, Vern, you were a professional career sailor. You sailed tall ships around the world for 5 years.
That's
right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And you obtained a U.S. Coast Guard license.
Yeah, I had a 100-ton captain's ticket.
To sit as a second officer.
And it permitted me to sit in Canada under their licensing regulations.
You played in the CFL for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers for 9 years. You won 2 Grey Cups as part of the team, and you retired from the CFL at age 32. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. You were inducted into the PEI Sports Hall of Fame.
That's correct.
And then you were a high school teacher. You earned your B.Ed, as I understand it, from McGill University, and taught math and French.
Yep, that's correct.
Must have been 50 or 60 by that time.
Well, I was getting older. That's for certain.
And the word is, Vern, that you trained as a boxer and a bull rider.
Well, I took boxing lessons, and after a few opportunities to spar with guys that were better boxers than me, I took an early retirement. Okay. And the bull riding career that I was hoping to set out on, that was interrupted by COVID.
Did you ever fall off a bull?
No, I've fallen off a few electronic bulls, though.
I won't ask you after drinking how many beer. Now, you received your law degree from Calgary, and I don't want to say this, and I'm just joking, it must have been in the very mature student admission category.
It was.
Okay,
it was.
I didn't know. I didn't want to offend you.
No, you're not offending me at all. I mean, I was attracted to going to University of Calgary's law school simply because it was the smallest law school in the country, short of, I think, Moncton University. And it only had a class of 60 per year. So I was terrified that I would go, I'd get in and not make it out. I was terrorized by this book that I had read called 1L. I can't remember the American. Scott Turow is the writer, and he writes about his first year of law school at Harvard. And it's nothing but people, dropping out and people failing out. I thought, after reading that, I thought, gosh, if I go to law school, my chances of surviving it are like 0 and none. And so I figured if I went to a small law school, I would get the sort of needed attention that a small environment would provide.
I won't ask you how well you did in law school, but I will say one of our former premiers of this province some time ago was asked how he fared at law school in terms of marks. And his answer was, I was in the top 75% of my class. As I understand from some of my friends, they called him the anchor. So Vern, what was your favorite job before law of all those jobs that I mentioned?
I loved parts and components of each profession that I was engaged in. When I graduated from the University of Prince Edward Island and was drafted by Winnipeg, I really held out no reasonable hope of ever making the team. I always thought it was a bit of a miracle that I did, and then managed to stick around for 9 years and win 2 Grey Cups, and that was great. But when I went sailing for 5 years, and that was also really an exciting part of my life, something that not everyone gets to do, because at that age in my life, when I retired from football, I was 32. Most of my peers were now married and having children. And here I was gallivanting around, the world, sailing.
Tall ships.
Sailing on tall ships, which is, it's all not always romantic. When you're a deck officer, you're responsible. So sometimes, just by way of example, it doesn't necessarily have to be heavy weather, but if you're transiting the English Channel in the dark, with limited visibility, and knowing that that's like a major highway of shipping, you have to be on your toes. It's exhausting. You're constantly manning 2 different sets of radar screens and making sure the whistle signals are going out and everything else, and you're communicating with other vessels. By the time your watch is over with, and they only span 4 hours, you're just completely spent. And then you have to stay on the deck, because now the next officer comes on, you got to give them that period of time where so it's sort of seamless that they get into it. And if things get a little bit tough, then you call the captain, and then you have more people on deck. But
That sounded like a trial to me.
Almost. But to answer your question, I thought the transition from football to practicing law was an easy one for me, because football is a sport. It's a competitive sport. And law is very competitive too, in the sense that you are playing a role in a very Hegelian dialectic system, where you're arguing your client's position and putting it forward, and the other side, or sides, depending on what the case may be, are putting forth their argument, and then there's an adjudicator, a judge, and it's competitive, and there are rules about that competition. And I just found that I would get excited for, if you're going into a trial or a summary trial or even an application in chambers, if it's something that's really important to advancing your client's case, it really kind of gets the competitive juices flowing.
But you weren't allowed to sack a judge.
No, or sack the other side for that matter.
Tell me, and you anticipated my next question, an obvious question, Vernon, where we're going here. So what job best prepared you for the practice of law?
I thought playing football did. I mean, it's really, I always had a checklist when I played, especially when I got to Winnipeg. I had to be physically prepared. So I always made sure I got enough sleep. I ate well, took my vitamins. I always made sure I got my lifts in. We had a strength coach, so you always had to attend, you get your lifts in. And then there was the mental part of it. Every week there were new plays that went in, and you'd get new plays that would be put in your playbook. And you'd have to know your plays. You'd attend endless meetings. You have endless practices where you run through it. And then you sort of, mentally, psychologically, you just have to be prepared. And then there's a spiritual component to it too, in many respects, in that you have to have, everything has to be sort of taken care of before the Sunday game, so to speak. So, and I don't think that's really much different than what you would do to prepare for a contest before a judge in advancing your client's case. I mean, physically, I want to be rested. I want to be sharp. I want to be fully prepared. If the judge is to ask you, well, what about what the court said in this case? I want to say, you want to know that case just like you want to know your playbook. So the psychology and the spiritual aspects of it, they all remain kind of uniform. The secret is, it's the old Boy Scout adage, be prepared. And I think that's kind of uniform between the two types of careers.
Okay. What was it, Vern, that inspired you to go to law school after all those amazing and interesting pursuits and such a charmed life sailing around the South Pacific? Because the first thing this morning I thought of was you as Marlon Brando being fed exotic bread food by locals, lying in a hammock in the South Pacific in Mutiny on the Bounty with everybody singing Happy Talk from the South Pacific album.
Well, I don't know if you're referring to the musical or whether you're referring to Marlon Brando playing, I don't know, was it Fletcher Christian or Captain Bligh?
The latter.
The latter. So I don't think it was quite like that. But it, the sailing part of it was wonderful. I mean, who can say that they have been to Robinson Crusoe Island, from which the book was taken from by Daniel Defoe. I've been to Easter Island. I've been to the Galapagos. I've been all around Africa, around South America, all through the South Pacific, across the Atlantic 4 or 5 times. Been to Hawaii and back probably 3 or 4 times. So I've got to see a fair amount of the world in that respect. But I don't know if that.
No,
I don't think I answered your question.
Let me ask again. What was the inspiration for you to go to law school after doing all those things?
Good question. And there is a certain event that sort of occurred. We had a cook on board who was a new cook, and he was a Polish fellow. And he had sort of been receiving distressing news from home whenever he phoned home at various ports. And apparently his young daughter, wasn't coping well with her father being away for this long period of time, because his articles with respect to sailing on the ship lasted 12 months, so he was going to be gone for a year. And I think for him, it was probably a real opportunity to make money that he couldn't make in Poland, but at the price of being separated from his family. And his daughter apparently was not coping well, and of course this was making life miserable for him. And then he made the decision, I have to go. His wife said, you got to come home. Her daughter's like, she's like catatonic or something to that effect. So now the question was, who's going to pay to repatriate this fellow? And we were in Nassau in the Bahamas, so that would have been an awkward place to get him, to repatriate him back to Poland. It was like a trip from Nassau to Miami to Krakow, which I can't remember what the airfare was, but it was significant. So I started looking into what the legalities were and the fine lettering of the agreement that he had signed with the company that owned the ship and everything. And at the end of the day, I sort of, with consultation with a lawyer that I just happened to stumble upon in Nassau, he looked it over and sort of said, well, here's what I would argue. So I sort of convinced the owners that they should repatriate him. It's good faith. The rest of the crew will look well upon this, knowing that if something should happen to their families at home and they have to be repatriated, that you'll take care of them. And they agreed with me, and they sent this fellow home, and they replaced him with somebody else. So then I thought to myself at the end of all this, geez, that would be a lot easier if I had a law degree.
Yeah.
So off I went, and
and if you lived in Nassau.
Exactly. And the thing was, I didn't leave right away, but I started to think about it. And then I realized, after a certain period of time toiling away at sea, it's a one-way ticket to poverty. There's not really very good money unless you're the captain of the vessel, but you have this long periods, 5 and 6 months away from home and family. And, I don't think they can pay somebody enough to be, separated from their family for that long a time. And I thought, well, maybe it's time to look at another career. And I thought, what, I think I'd like to see what happens. Maybe I'll apply to law school. What's the worst that could happen? I don't like it. And off I applied, and I wrote the LSAT and applied to a number of law schools, and Calgary it was.
No, there's one thing that I have great problems with that you have said that I read.
Okay.
I'm setting you up for this. It's like a cross.
I'm bracing myself.
It's like a good cross, Mr. Pahl.
All right.
You actually said that paradise can be tiring.
Yeah.
And how is that when we're having a cold day in November and we're dealing with these things called atmospheric rivers?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think after a while, paradise does get boring a little bit. I think the romance of the sea is something that's conjured by writers who come home from the sea and are sitting next to comfortably at their dining room table, and with a crackling fire in the background, and they have these memories of, you know, beautiful white sandy beaches and turquoise waters and, you know, palm trees and everything else that go with that sort of image. It's great, but if you're seeing it all the time, after a while, it just gets boring. It's the same. It gets hot. I mean, there's parts of northern Australia I hope to never go anywhere near ever again that are so hot. I spent 3 days in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and then sailed through the Red Sea. I'd never experienced heat like that in my life. Temperatures on the deck, let me finish, this is really important. Temperatures on the deck at 125 degrees Fahrenheit. It's just like unbelievable. You couldn't do anything for longer than 60 seconds without sitting down. It was so hot. Okay. Anyways, I hope that answers your question.
Well, it's not like Vegas where you can go inside and bet.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, you have said that, and I'm quoting, you are not seduced by the popular media portrayal of a litigator. Okay. So what was it that seduced you into doing what we all do here?
You know, I don't think I was seduced so much as I was kind of, I don't know, maybe tantalized somehow, that it struck me as very intriguing. You know, you have this body of knowledge and then you get to apply it, and this body of knowledge is kind of something that's constantly you know, metamorphosizing into different shapes. The law is changing, and that you can play a role on it, or in it rather. I think that's what I found kind of intriguing. And I mean, I love what I do. You know, when I get up in the morning, and I've been practicing 25, 26 years. When I get up in the morning, I go, oh God, I'm going to drag my ass into the office again. I never feel like that ever.
That's why you're here.
That's exactly. I'm hiding out from the office. So, anyways, I just kind of liked. I don't know. I've always enjoyed it. I've always enjoyed it
because of that attitude. That's why you're here. Because of that attitude. One thing that I may have missed in asking you, would your law career, do you think, been any different had you not pursued all those jobs that you had before?
You know what? It's interesting. For many years, whenever students are applying to the firm, either for summer positions or articles, and you interview them and you read through their resumes and you talk with them, and most of them are just genuinely really wonderful people. But I sort of look at them and I say goodbye and say, well, we'll be in touch. And I sort of look at them and I go, gosh, they've been in school right up to today.
Yes.
Right up to today. They started school when they were 5, and here they are in my office, and they're still in school. They have not gone a year without going. And my situation was significantly different in that all of a sudden I left university and started playing football, and then I went to sea, and so some 14 years. And in the off season when I was playing football, I would always go back to school and work on my teaching degree. So I was picking up a couple of credits every winter, and so I wanted to be able to hang a shingle up because. Football's, the average lifespan of a football player is a little shorter than 4 years, so it's not really between both leagues, so it's not very long. So, and to get fully invested in the pension, you had to play 5 seasons. So there's sort of little target dates in it. But anyways, I think the whole. I'm lost. I lost my thread.
No problem.
You don't want to give me open-ended questions or anything like that.
I wondered whether your law career would have been any different had you not pursued all those things before.
You're putting me back on point. I'll tell you, what?
It would have been a lot different because it's all the human experiences and life experiences that you now know about.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that point. I felt a little bit more informed, more about human nature than anything else, and certainly in the litigation aspect of law. Yeah. It is about human nature. And you talk to family law lawyers, and I'm sure they could, fill your ears with all their experiences and the predictabilities of certain conduct and how people behave, and it's part of sometimes of client management. That you've seen this before.
Oh, there's
you
a
know
lot
the
of
reaction,
that.
you know the bruised hearts and all these other things. So you know how to conduct yourself in the best interest of your client. Anyways,
you have practiced in the area, and please add anything if I missed anything. Municipal law, maritime law, personal injury, general insurance defense litigation, property claims. Anything else we should know about?
No, that's pretty much it. I mean, I've done a fair amount. I cut my teeth at doing municipal defense work during the era of the leaky condo crisis. You may remember that.
Yes, I do.
It wasn't that long ago. And that's what I did for like 5 or 6 years. And that's sort of as Tony Saunders said back then, or Judge Saunders now, he said the pig had passed through the python, and it was over with. And,
well, I don't know if you're old enough to remember what came before that, MERBs.
That's right, multi-unit residential buildings.
Okay.
Yes,
We'll just leave that.
Yeah.
I don't want the audience to know how long I've been around. So for all the people out there, I want you to tell them, what is the part of law that you like best, and what's the part you like least?
Let's start with the latter part of the question, least. I hate timesheets. I hate the administrative aspect. I'm not crazy about the administrative part of it, the billing part of it. I mean, you've got to pay the rent. You've got to keep the lights on. And that is just a function of the business aspect of the law. So I'm less thrilled with the business aspect of it, but you just accept it as something that has to be done, and you can't practice unless you're infinitely wealthy or whatever, and not charge people for it. And that part of it, I'm not big on it. But I enjoy the challenge of certain cases. Sometimes that look like hopeless cases, and you can turn them around. Sometimes, in the course of investigating what actually happened, for example, in a major fire loss in a warehouse, and you're trying to figure out how did this place burn down, and how is it, allegedly my client's fault, and it just, living with it, working with it, talking with the people that are involved, the people that, that are accused of having negligently installed electrical system which caused this fire, which burned down a $13 million warehouse. And they're, save me, help me. I didn't do anything wrong. I did it right. I think they're crazy. It's not me. And then after a while, you start to get into the feel of it all and into the facts and digging around and talking to experts, and you become quite knowledgeable about the subject, and it always makes me feel good if I can help.
Okay. You've said that sometimes you find litigation frustrating. And so what part of that do you find most frustrating?
Well, the frustrating part of it is that sometimes you can put forward a case that, in my estimate, is kind of bulletproof, but somehow or another you find yourself at a mediation, and there's a number of parties gathered in one room, or various rooms for that matter, and at the end of the day you end up paying simply because it makes good economic sense. I find that troubling a lot. We haven't done anything wrong. We're not liable at law, but there's an insurance company behind me, and they're kind of like, Vern, we're happy to get rid of this if it costs us, X, Y, or Z thousands of dollars if we can get out of it today. And I understand their approach. It's purely a business decision on their part. But if you come in there with these notions that there's got to be some sort of principled approach to the outcome of this, you're a little bit disappointed.
Yeah, I understand.
So that's. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. So for Vernon Pahl, what's a really good day in law for you?
That's a good question. I think if you have a day where there's a good outcome for your client. I've had it. I remember once And this is a home run. This was a sort of a grand slam home run. It was the first day of trial, and I can't remember. It was a geotechnical matter with involving a residence. It was a hydrology case, and this house was damaged. And first day of trial, we were defending a local municipality, and the plaintiff, we had agreed on a schedule as to what witnesses were going to be called. So I had prepared for the witnesses that the two witnesses I was going to cross that day, and my associate was going to do the third. And all of a sudden there was this change where they were going to put their expert in the box first. But I just happened on the Sunday, figured, well, you know what? I'm going to start for Tuesday because they're calling their expert Tuesday. Anyway, so I cross-examined the expert on the first day, and it was their whole case was gone after that. And
that's a good day.
And it was just one of those great days. And I sort of turned to him at the break at lunch, and I said, "Your call. You want to keep going?" And he said, "Your client accept a waiver of costs."
Yes.
I said, "All I can do is ask."
Okay.
And so it was done. It was done in half a day.
We all have bad days. There's
Absolutely.
No doubt. So all of us.
Yeah.
What do you do to chill out after a bad day?
You know what? I love. I've got a hobby of mine is I do this sort of nautical. I know it sounds kind of weird. It's nautical decorative work. I do like fancy knots. I make bell ropes and sea chest handles. It's very sort of intricate, small knotting. And there's very few people that do it, but there is an international guild of knot tiers, which is an international association, which I'm a member of. So I do that. I sew. I have a sewing machine. I do canvas work. I like to sit down at my sewing machine and make things. I know it sounds like a very peculiar.
No, it's just that one of my zippers fell off yesterday.
Unless you want me to make you a pair of canvas trousers, I don't think I can help you. But I enjoy just making things that are sort of nautically oriented.
Okay.
I recently was commissioned by a local pub to make a bell rope for them, and I love walking into that pub every once in a while and staring at that bell and looking at that bell rope. You know.
Cool. So what's the favorite part of litigation for you? Discoveries, cross, submissions?
I think I like things to be a little bit more predictable and controlled. I like doing discoveries. I'm not a terror at it. I'm not also, a genius at it either, but I enjoy preparing for it and making a list of what are the things I hope to get out of this witness. Because it's kind of relaxed. I'm not standing, I'm seated. I can take my time. Whereas cross, sometimes, if you hesitate right away, the judge typically stops writing and looks at you going, are you having a seizure there, Mr. Pahl? Or I lost my train of thought,
Yeah.
But it's a little bit more pressured.
Yeah.
I like discoveries. Yeah. And I enjoy sometimes there are just days where I just want to just sit and just review documents. Yeah. And I take great interest in reading through them, and sometimes it's boring, but oftentimes you find a pearl amongst all these shells, and it sometimes turns the case a bit.
Yeah. Vern, you're on the show for a number of reasons, all really positive ones, some that I've mentioned. But one of the main reasons why you're on the show, and I don't know whether everybody out there, if they're missing ethical CPD points, they can get them. But you're well known as a highly ethical professional. And I want to know whether that's innate or learned for you.
I think it's both in many respects. I mean, our profession is called to a very high standard, and for me it's easy to always take. I always choose to take the high road in these things. I want other lawyers to talk about me saying he's a good guy, he can be trusted. I may not like him, but you know what? He's never done me wrong.
His word is good.
Yeah, his word is good. This sort of thing. And I think all lawyers should strive to be like that.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, no one's ever going to say, "Well, Vernon Pahl, what a brilliant lawyer." You know, that's never going to happen. But I just want to be known as, you know, someone who's a fair shooter, who's accommodating. If somebody's messed up, you know, I'm always first to recognize that, gee, that could be me, and they missed a date. They're late. I always say, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. I don't care. You know, I mean, I can't speak for everybody else, but I don't have my knickers in a twist over this. And
if I was a young, brazen lawyer, what would you tell me if I asked you how I could become a highly ethical professional?
Highly ethical professional. Well, first of all, I mean, it bodes well if you read the code of conduct. I mean, I always go through that even with the junior lawyers.
I've actually had to do that over the last
you know,
year.
and you know, people forget about it, but there's always some things in there, and it's changing a little bit too. So, I mean, it's always that's the foundation of it all. And I would start there, but and I'm reluctant to use the word gentleman because I may be excluding genders, but I think the sort of code of conduct, the gentlemanly code of conduct, it applies to women just as equally. Just to conduct yourself like a gentleman, whether male or female.
Is there anybody in particular that you've modeled yourself after from an ethical perspective?
Well, you know, there's so many people that, you know, I could say that are just like bedrock when it comes to ethical conduct, but nobody's going to beat Donald Yule. Donald Yule is, he's still with our firm. He's not practicing as actively, but you will not meet a more ethical lawyer on this planet than that man. And if you can be half as ethical as Donald Yule is, I think you're going to be a fine lawyer. Was
his innate or was it learned?
I'm going to have to say both. I think it's just part and parcel of it. His brother was a highly reputable lawyer, and so was his father, and I think even his grandfather before him. The Yule that's in our firm masthead, I think that's his father or grandfather.
Yes,
I can't remember.
I know. So, Vern, there's a lot of lawyers watching, and many of my colleagues and your colleagues, that find trials particularly stressful. That has somewhat been cured by the prevalence of mediation now as a result of remote issues and COVID. So how do you deal with, if you're in a long trial, apart from your hobbies, how do you deal with the stresses of a long trial?
I don't know if I've ever learned how to deal with the stresses.
Well, that's fair too.
You know, I mean, I find it the days leading up to it. You think you've ruined the case. You know, you forgot to do this, you forgot to do that, I overlooked this. I just read this document, and I can't get this witness to cooperate. There's just so many uncontrolled tangible and intangibles to preparing for a
surprises.
Trial. And surprises. I mean, there's the surprises in the first week before the trial starts where you're trying to get people to cooperate. Well, I can't come. And I said, well, I've served you with a subpoena, and you've got the conduct monies. Please try to accommodate me and the court. And you try to be very good about it because you don't want to anger the witnesses. If they show up and they're bitter about it, you know, and say, well, what's your favorite color? Blue. What? Hold it. Didn't I have a conversation with you a month ago and you said it was red? You know, and they're going to give you a hard time, and you want to avoid that like the plague. Anyways, how do I deal with the stresses? I don't know. I don't think I've ever dealt with them. Trial is stressful. I mean, there are some real masterful litigators in Vancouver that, when you look at them perform, you go, geez, it's like he's, like falling off a log. It's so easy. And
you're guessing it's easy.
Yeah, well, I guess so. But, I have to script it, and if I deviate from the script, all of a sudden I'm lost.
Well, I'm like you. So tell me something. In the area that I practice, clients were not always easygoing. And so how do you deal with difficult clients?
I think you try to. I think you try to accommodate them as best you can. Mm-hmm. I've quickly learned that you're not going to get everybody to love you. You want to be fair, honest. You want to be consistent, and avoid being apologetic, because I find that there's some clients or personalities that if you start apologizing, they start sensing that there's a weakness in you. I just tell them, will you promise me to get me that? And I said, yeah, I did promise you to get that. I can't get you that, and here's why. But as soon as I can get it, I'll make sure that I summarize it and send it to you right away by email. And I usually follow up. We'll get it to them. It may be a bit late. You got to be careful about making promises to clients. That's one thing you want to avoid, because clients, I find, don't tolerate broken promises. So and
you'll be reminded of it.
Absolutely.
Either at your office or at a registrar's hearing.
Exactly. Yes. No, not the latter. Hopefully not. But you just want to avoid making promises. You want to make, I propose to do this.
Yes, okay. So following up on that, and we all have to deal with this again, and I'm sure everybody wants to hear what you have to say about this, because I sure do. How on earth do you deal with very difficult and rude opposing counsel?
Oh,
I'll
tell you what, when I retire, I'm going to write a book on that.
But if young lawyers out there, what would you tell them about how to deal?
You've got to take the high road. Don't get baited into it. I've been victimized by, behaviors that have caused me to get angry and yell, raise my voice, use probably vocabulary that I wouldn't use in the normal course of exchanges with counsel. They get under your skin. It takes great self-discipline. I confess I don't possess a great amount of it, but I try my best. I tend to, in multi-party actions, I look at the people around me and say, what do I do here? What are they doing? And if they're not reacting strangely or mad or anything like that, then I don't. Yeah. I try not to.
On this show, and we talked about it before the show, that I interviewed the great American cross-examiner Larry Posner,
right,
who is conducting a CLE course on cross-examination this month. And he said a number of things, and I want to know if you agree with them.
All right.
Preparation is the greatest technique for winning.
Absolutely.
Your reputation for integrity will win you more applications than case law.
I agree.
And then he said, of your 10 greatest victories, 7 will be deals. Nobody will hear about the deals, but they count just as much.
I'd have to agree. And I think those are 3 very wise statements.
Okay. This is the part of the show where you may want to tense up, because I'm going to ask you rapid fire questions.
All right, fire away.
Did I tell you I was going to do that?
No.
Okay. Would you prefer a great cross-examination or sacking a quarterback?
Sacking a quarterback. But not at this age,
Would you rather be in paradise or a courtroom, Mr. Pahl?
Give me paradise. I haven't seen it in a while.
Okay. Who inspires you outside of the practice of law?
Oh, gosh. Who inspires me outside the practice of law? I've never really turned my mind to that, I can't.
You can get back to me on that.
I'm going to have to.
Okay.
I've got to. That's a loaded question, because there's probably 5 or 6 people. Outside the practice of law, and I'm going to say outside the firm I practice with. So I'd have to. If I was to name 1 or 2, I'd offend 3.
Okay, you're allowed to lie on this show.
Okay. What? I thought we were talking about ethics earlier.
What is your favorite song of all time? And you're not allowed to say "Sailing" by Christopher Cross.
Southern Cross.
Southern Cross. Okay. What's your favorite food when you're on a tall ship?
Anything that's a favorite food of mine is not available on any sailing ships I've been on. Quite typically, I'm happy with porridge, believe it or not. A good bowl of porridge.
I don't know. If I knew that before I had you on the show, I don't know whether I would have done that. What's your worst seasick experience?
I've never been seasick.
Well, there you go. Okay.
And I'm grateful
Is that innate or learned?
That's innate.
Okay. And you've never been thrown off a bull?
Electronic bull or electric bull.
How many beers?
I probably had about a half a dozen beers.
Okay. Last question. If you could do your entire career over again, would you omit anything?
Omit anything?
Yeah.
Everyone wants a couple of do-overs. I have a couple of courtroom appearances that I would like a do-over for, and I'll keep those to myself.
Me too.
I think we all have them, but there were some moments there where I was pinned by a judge, and the only reason I was unable to get out from underneath it was that I wasn't properly prepared, and that's my own fault.
Okay. Briefly, because we need some time for a question. Do you recall the favorite case you ever litigated?
Favorite case? I don't think I have a favorite one. They kind of blur into one another, Okay. I'm sorry. There's no.
That's okay.
There's no triumphant moment.
There wasn't a contingency. There wasn't a 75% contingency fee agreement on any particular case.
No. Not that I recall.
Contrary to the code.
I wouldn't consider the monetary victory to be something that I would, hang on my mantle place as a sort of a real triumph in terms of litigation. But there's been a few, I think it was a former lawyer that was at Yule, Paul Cote, said, if you win 40% of your cases, you're a fantastic lawyer.
I know Paul, but I won't tell you what percentage of cases that he won, okay? Even if and I can tell you, and I hope Paul's watching, even if he did tell you, he'd embellish it.
Yes.
Okay. There's a question, and I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
That'll be we'll end the show after that. The question is, you have been involved with many varied and interesting occupations, and there's no doubt about that. What advice would you give to someone who has done nothing but practice law, is consumed by the practice, and is approaching retirement?
My first thought, and I've seen this before, where that's all somebody has done, that's all they know, and I hope I'm not describing yourself, Jeff, but and they have really basically gotten married, had a couple of kids, and just practiced law.
For sure, you're not describing me.
And that's all they've done, and then all of a sudden they're retired and they're a little bit bewildered and disoriented because they have nowhere else to channel their energies, whether it be skiing or flying a plane or sailing a boat or whatever it might be. I think the idea is to probably look around, and I think one way of making a transition, I would think would be a really good sort of panacea for someone that's in that kind of circumstance. Travel.
Okay.
Just buy yourself a round the world ticket and just get on a plane and go.
Okay. I have to ask our producers whether we can go a couple more minutes. Thank you, because it's getting interesting.
All right.
Bombers or Argos?
Sorry, it's going to be bombers. I can't see the Argos beating them.
What's your?
You know why? Here's my strategy. When the Western, I sort of look at it like this. Winnipeg is further west than Toronto is. The game, I think, is in Saskatchewan.
It is.
So Winnipeg's closer to Saskatchewan than Toronto is. That's the tipping point right there. I think that Winnipeg will win it.
But here's a real hard one. Favorite team in the NFL?
Buffalo Bills.
They're doing well.
I like them. You know why? Because it's a sort of town in a world, in a league full of, multimillionaires and dynamic egos, guys that play in this. It's not Hollywood, Buffalo, if you spent any time there. And it's not like it's Green Bay is glamorous compared to Buffalo.
Okay.
So Buffalo manages to assemble this team that's doing incredibly well. They lost the last 2 games, but I cheer for the Buffalo Bills.
Now, I know I'm going to get a review afterwards that says that we're talking too much about football and sailing, but I'll just let that be. Here's another sailing question.
All right.
From a viewer. There's a saying about boating. The worst day on water is better than the best day on land. Do you have a boat at this time? Good question, whoever asked it. And are you still sailing?
I am. I have a West Sail 32. It's a cutter rig boat. I keep it down in Horseshoe Bay.
Yeah.
And it's my sanctuary.
Okay.
It's where I go when I just want to tinker around.
Well, that's
you
do. That's what you do to chill out.
Yeah, there's sometimes I go down there at after work and I sleep on board overnight.
Okay, and I'm going to go to another question, if I may. Any advice for switching practice areas? For example, a new career outside of criminal law?
Absolutely. I think that what you want to do is figure out, first of all, what is it you're interested in doing. If you want to do. So you want to go from criminal law to insurance defense work, then I would look at the subsections, the insurance law subsections. I'd join that, become involved in it, start following the cases and all of that, and looking at the firms that actually practice in that particular area. And if it's something else, if it's immigration or whatever it might be, just join those subsections, start attending the meetings, reading the cases, meeting the people that are practicing in that area. I mean, firms are always attracted to lawyers who may not have a considerable amount of experience and expertise in a given area of the law, but they're always attracted to people that have a genuine interest in that area of the law.
Yeah. Vern, I want to thank you. It's been
my pleasure.
Very interesting, and you and I didn't know each other before, but this has been a great pleasure getting to know you. I say that sincerely. And I want to thank the audience. We'll have one more show before the new year. I want all of you to make sure that you watch it. Sue Paish, KC, went from the managing partner of Fasken to president and CEO of Life Labs, CEO of PharmaSave, and the chair of the Business Council of BC. And she's won numerous accolades, including the top 100 powerful women being in the Hall of Fame. And that's just to name a few of things she's done. So that show should not be missed. We'll see you all in 2 weeks, and then hopefully we'll see you all in the new year. And Vern, it's been a pleasure.
My pleasure.
Okay.
Absolutely.